My fiance chose my stepsister, but soon they came begging for my help. I was 28 years old when my life got completely turned upside down. About 4 years ago, I was engaged to my longtime boyfriend. We had been together since college, staying by each other's side through every challenge. At 23, we got engaged, and our engagement lasted a year. But just a week before our wedding, he ran away with my stepsister. My ex-fiancé Jake, who was 30 at the time, and my stepsister Olivia, who was also 28, disappeared together. All they left behind was a letter. In it, Jake confessed that he had been having an affair with Olivia for months pretty much, right after we got engaged. He wrote that he couldn't go through with the wedding because it wouldn't be fair to me, to himself, or to Olivia. According to him, they were truly in love, and he believed that the universe had merely used me as a bridge to bring him to his true soulmate. He claimed he couldn't keep lying to himself or to me. And that was it. They vanished. I didn't see them again for years. Jake's parents, utterly humiliated by what their son had done, covered every expense for the wedding that never happened. I didn't have to pay a dime. That was the last time I ever spoke to them. We had nothing left to say. My own family, on the other hand, was beyond furious. My dad was so enraged that he seriously considered hiring a private investigator to track those two down and drag them back for an explanation. And when I say dad, I mean my stepfather, but in every way that mattered. He was my real father. He had been there for me since I was a kid. I never knew my biological father. He left right after I was born, signed away his parental rights, and my mother never saw him again. She later married my stepfather when I was 8. That's also how Olivia came into my life. We went to the same school, which is how our parents met. But for whatever reason, Olivia never liked me. No, she hated me. She bullied me relentlessly, making my life a living hell both at school and at home. She always found a way to hurt me. I begged my parents to do something, and while they tried, it never stopped her. She wasn't scared of anyone. School was a nightmare because of her and her friends. My stepfather and mother tried everything: punishments, heart-to-heart talks, even threats to send her to a reform school. Nothing worked. She laughed in their faces. To be fair, Olivia's life wasn't easy. Her mother died when she was a baby, taken by a sudden epileptic seizure in the middle of the night. When my mother tried to step in and raise her, Olivia refused, always reminding her that she wasn't her real mom. She didn't respect our father either. As she got older, things got worse. By high school, she was out of control drinking, partying, disappearing for days. Then, one day, she and her friends broke into someone's house and got arrested. That was the breaking point. My parents finally sent her to rehab. And that was the moment she said something that, like an idiot, made me feel sorry for her. I forgave her. I even tried to be her friend. That's what stings the most. After years of being tormented by her, I actually let my guard down. She and I were finally in a good place, or so I thought. We weren't best friends, but we were no longer enemies. She even helped with my wedding planning. I never suspected a thing. She met Jake at family gatherings, but nothing seemed off. Even after our engagement, they acted completely normal. Looking back, I realize how well they played their roles. Jake never gave me a reason to doubt him. He convinced me he loved me, all while sneaking around with Olivia behind my back. She, in turn, pretended to be the supportive stepsister. I only found out the truth when it was too late. They were gone. My parents wanted to hunt them down, to force them to explain themselves, but I begged them to let it go. I just wanted to forget. The humiliation of being dumped a week before my wedding was bad enough. I was already drowning in misery. I didn't need more drama. For weeks, I did nothing but work and sleep, trying to numb myself from the pain. My heart was shattered. But the worst part? It was still ahead of me. A few weeks after my wedding was supposed to take place, I received a postcard from Olivia. She was in California, but that wasn't the worst part. She also included a stack of photos of her and Jake grinning, glowing, absolutely thrilled with their new life. It was obvious she had sent them to hurt me. She even wrote that she was sorry for the surprise before the wedding. But she wasn't sorry, she just wanted to twist the knife deeper. That was the moment I realized Olivia had never truly forgiven me for what happened years ago. In her mind, I was still to blame for her being sent away. She had never wanted to be my friend, had simply used me as a stepping stone to get closer to Jake. I had been nothing more than a tool in her little scheme, and I had fallen for it like a fool. For days after getting that postcard, I couldn't sleep. My mind was spiraling, replaying everything over and over. It was a deeply traumatic experience, and it took months of therapy before I could even begin to trust people again. And that postcard? It wasn't the last. For almost a year, she kept sending them, each one filled with more pictures of their perfect life. I never responded. I refused to give her the reaction she wanted. Eventually, she gave up. My parents were devastated. They cut all ties with her immediately. Not once did they try to contact her after that first postcard. And for Olivia, that was a massive loss. She had spent years preparing to take over our father's business. She had studied business specifically for that reason. But after what she had done, our father completely erased her from his life. Instead, he turned to me. I had no background in business. I had studied history, which had absolutely nothing to do with running a company. But my father told me it didn't matter. He was willing to teach me everything from scratch so that I could take over instead. I agreed. I threw myself into learning, working under his guidance until, eventually, he retired and left everything in my hand. I worked my ass off for years, and last year, I was officially promoted, taking full control of the business. It was an incredible feeling starting from zero, learning everything on my own, and now running an entire company. Thanks to me, my parents could finally relax, enjoy their time together, and not worry about work. And for the longest time, I barely thought about Jake or Olivia. Work, along with therapy, helped me move on. I can say with full confidence that I have completely let go of the past. I never imagined they'd contact me again, certainly not to ask for help, because to do that, they'd need to have an unbelievable amount of audacity. And yet, a few days ago, that's exactly what happened. It was my day off, and I was at home. Around noon, I heard the doorbell ringing aggressively. I assumed it was just the pizza I had ordered, so I didn't think much of it. But when I opened the door, I was met with the biggest shock of my life. There stood Olivia. She looked desperate. I was so stunned, I just stood there in silence, waiting for her to speak. And as I looked at her, it became painfully clear that she was here to beg for something. She didn't even look like herself. Olivia had always been stylish, even as a teenager, but now, she was wearing old, faded clothes that were clearly years out of fashion. Her jeans were too short, and she looked like she hadn't had a proper meal in weeks. I didn't care. I had already decided whatever she was about to ask, the answer was no. Then she spoke. She needed help. Apparently, she and Jake had been struggling for a long time. Things got worse when he lost his job a couple of months ago. Instead of looking for a new one, he had started drinking. And Olivia? She couldn't find work because of the massive gap in her resume. After they ran away, she had decided to be a stay-at-home wife. Now, with no recent work experience, no one wanted to hire her. Then she said the real reason she was here. She had heard, through some relatives, that her father had retired and left the business to me. So she came to me to ask if I could hire Jake. She actually thought I would give him a job. Olivia said she came to me directly instead of going to our parents because she knew I had a good heart. She swore she deeply regretted betraying me in the past and hoped that I wouldn't turn my back on her in her time of need. Her audacity was so absurd that I actually laughed in her face. Then, I told her to go find a job somewhere else because I don't hire traitors. I slammed the door in her face and walked back to my living room, fully prepared to call the police if she didn't leave. Fortunately, she left that day. But she wasn't done. The first thing I did after her visit was call my parents and tell them everything. They had already heard from some neighbors that Olivia was back in town alone. She had apparently been here for about a week before showing up at my door. She was staying with an old high school friend, which was likely how she found out where I lived and that the business her birthright was now mine. Clearly, she thought she could use that to her advantage. A few days after she failed with me, Olivia went to our parents to complain about how cruel I was. She expected them to take her side, to see her as the victim. She miscalculated. Badly. My father made it very clear. The business was now mine. He had retired, and whatever I decided to do with it was entirely up to me. He wasn't going to interfere. My mother reminded Olivia that she had betrayed me, that she had spent years pretending to be my friend while sneaking around with my fiance. And after everything she had done, including sending me those postcards just to rub salt in the wound, had no right to ask for help. Olivia tried to defend herself, insisting that all of that was in the past, that she was a different person now. But my parents weren't interested. They told her they wanted nothing more to do with her. They asked her to leave. That's when she lost it. She snapped. She started screaming about how our parents had always favored me, how they treated me like the golden child while she was cast aside. She accused my father, her biological father, of never loving her the way he loved me. She said he always acted like I was his only child, and that she meant nothing to him. My father, to his credit, remained calm. He told her that he had been far more patient and forgiving with her than most parents would have been. That wasn't good enough for her. She kept going, ranting about how I had taken everything that was supposed to be her sure inheritance, her place in the family business. And she even had the audacity to say that it wasn't her fault that Jake had fallen in love with her, that he had chosen her over me. Yet somehow, she was the one being punished. Then get this, she actually tried to claim that all those postcards she sent me were sincere attempts at an apology. I haven't been able to stop thinking about what she said. In some twisted way, she's right. That business was supposed to go to her. She was meant to be in my position. But she lost it all because of her own choices. I had no part in that decision. I never asked my father to cut her out. I never asked for the business to be handed to me. He made that choice on his own, and yet, she blames me. The whole golden child accusation is unfair, but I can see why she feels that way. From her perspective, my complaints about her bullying all those years ago were what led to her being sent away. And, to be fair, sending a child to a rehabilitation program is an extreme step. I know how hard that was for my father. But again, that's not my fault. It's not his fault either. If he hadn't done something back then, she would have ended up in a very different place, probably in jail. And let's be real, those postcards? Not an apology. I do feel bad for her. Jake turned out to be a complete loser, and now she's stuck trying to drag him out of the hole he dug. It must have been humiliating to come to me for help. And in some twisted way, I do pity her. I have everything. She has nothing. And that makes me feel uneasy. Not guilty because she did this to herself, but uneasy. Because now that I'm the one in power, it feels almost like I got my revenge on her. And that feeling, it doesn't sit right with me. Maybe it was what she said about being the golden child. Or maybe it was just plain old imposter syndrome. But I couldn't shake this uncomfortable feeling. Was I the villain for refusing to help my ex-fiance, the man who ran off with my stepsister when they were broke and desperate? Let's hit pause on this story and answer that question. Update 1. I didn't know how to feel. Some of the comments I received made me even more confused. Some said I was absolutely right to refuse them, while others claimed I had always been the golden child and that Olivia's behavior was a result of that. I decided to talk to my parents. Whenever I struggled with something, I always turned to them for advice, and this time was no different. They told me I had no reason to feel guilty. Everyone around Olivia had done everything possible to help her become a better person. But if she never wanted to change, no one could do it for her. My father made it clear. If Olivia had been a decent person, if she had proven herself to be a responsible daughter, he would have given her the business. But she had failed at everything she touched and humiliated our family in the worst way. After all of that, why would he ever let her run the company or even remain a part of the family? His words were a huge relief. Talking to them always helps me put my doubts to rest. So now, I'm going to stop feeling guilty. Update 2. About a week had passed since Olivia showed up at my house. After her visit to our parents, we hadn't heard from her. I was starting to think she might have gone back to California with Jake. Then today happened. She showed up at my workplace and caused a scene. Since she grew up around the business, she knew exactly how to get in. Security didn't stop her. She walked right past them and went straight to my office, where she started screaming. She was furious, shouting about how I had stolen the company right from under her nose, how I had spent my life acting like the perfect daughter just to win over our parents. According to her, I was the one who made her look bad. As a child, I had exaggerated her bullying, manipulated my father into sending her to rehab, all just to secure my role as the family's golden child. She ranted that the company should have been hers, that I was keeping her out of it because I was still jealous that Jake had chosen her over me. Apparently, I couldn't handle being ignored, so I turned our parents against her. When I heard the shouting, I called security and then stepped out to face her. I told her to shut up. She kept screaming accusations at me for a few more minutes until security finally dragged her out of the building. I called my father before involving the police, just to get his thoughts. He was livid. He told me to call the police immediately. Fortunately, by the time the officers arrived, Olivia was still lurking around, outside probably waiting to ambush me again, or, worse, try something physical. They arrested her. She was charged with trespassing and disturbing the peace of nothing major, just a fine or maybe community service at worst. But it would stay on her record, and that definitely wouldn't help her situation. I expected my father to be at least a little upset about the whole thing, but he wasn't. He just looked exhausted. He said he was tired of Olivia's nonsense and just wanted all of this to be over. Honestly, I felt bad for him. It must be draining to have a daughter who blames you for every single thing wrong in her life, even when almost all of it is her own fault. Our family has been insanely patient with her. Update 3. It looks like Olivia finally left town. It's been a few days, and we haven't heard a word from her, which is odd, because we were expecting another outburst after her arrest. But my father asked around, and apparently, someone saw her at the airport. So, I'm guessing she's back in California. And honestly, I feel so relieved. I was genuinely afraid that her next move would be something extreme, some desperate attempt to get attention. And that never ends well. I have no idea what she's going to do now. I doubt anyone else is going to help her and Jake after everything that's happened. I hope she finds a job and gets herself together. And no, I'm not saying that out of kindness. This is pure self-interest. Because if she doesn't find a way to fix her life, then eventually she's going to come back. And I really don't want that. So for now, I'm just going to pray that either she or Jake gets their shit together. Maybe, just maybe, this nightmare is finally over. Thank you for your attention. Subscribe, leave a like, and have a great day.